When we're young, we move with freedom and confidence, with a great resilience to injury. But somewhere along the line, we develop poor habits and become more vulnerable to back pain. Back Pain Solutions features evidence-based and practical advice to help you take back control of your health and get back to the activities you love. This is your guide to better back health through movement. So join us as we demystify some of the commonly held beliefs about back pain and build your confidence to a stronger back the smart way.
So, Dr. Osler, welcome to the Back Pain Solutions podcast. Thank you kindly for joining me this afternoon, and I'm excited to talk about all things active chairs and your background. So, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, and where you're up to now, and why active chairs.
Yeah, no. So it's surprising, really, and no one is more surprised than me, except perhaps my wife or maybe my son. I was like your standard mild-mannered trauma surgeon, sewing up gunshot wounds and car wrecks in the middle of the night for 25 years, at the University of New Mexico and then now at the University of Vermont. And but it's staying up all night, it was okay, but the next day was getting harder and harder for me as I was getting older. So, and there are younger people who want to be in the game of trauma surgery. So I got a grant from the NIH for a few $1 million and a master's degree in biostats, and I started studying modeling outcomes for trauma centers, trying to figure out which trauma centers were doing a better job and which trauma centers were not having results that were as good, with an eye toward bringing the laggards up to standard and trying to learn from the best. So I found myself doing epidemiology and statistical modeling and sitting most of the day, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, like everybody else. So I traded in the peripatetic life of a trauma surgeon, ER, OR, clinic, ICU, back to the ER, up to the OR kind of stuff, for just like sitting all day. And my back started to bother me. I thought, well, what's up with that? I've been fine for, my whole life, and now it didn't seem right, So I bought basically every chair that was supposed to help. And not all of them were terrible. Some of them, they made things worse. The Balin's kneeling chair, the yoga ball. I went through the whole litany because I was just ruthlessly trying out. I thought surely someone had worked this out, but it turns out they hadn't. And so, as a surgeon, you kind of get used to the idea that if you're in the OR, you have to solve the problem because ain't nobody going to rescue you.
Okay.
And it's it's an act of hubris, really. You walk in the OR with water dripping off your elbows and you say, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm sure I can fix it. And you have to be a crazy person to say that. But if you can't say it, you can't do the job. So anyway, that's the space I lived in for a long time. I thought, okay, well, fine, I'll just work this out. And I took a deep dive into back pain and just exactly how it happens. And it's really sort of a surprising story. It turns out in other countries where people still sit in traditional ways, they squat or they sit seiza or they kneel or they sit cross-legged. Back pain is pretty much unknown. It's just in the Western world where we've got ergonomic chairs helping us out that 80% of Americans and most of the Western world seek the help of some healthcare professional sometime in their life for back pain, which is just crazy when you think about it. The human spine is a perfectly evolved thing. Billions of years worth of prototyping if you count all the vertebrates, and then 3 million years in daily use as hunter-gatherers. Chairs that we sit a lot, and the chairs that we sit on are terrible for us. They're bad for our posture, they're bad for our core strength, and it turns out they're very bad for our biochemistry. We have been hunter-gatherers for the last 3 million years, and walking 10 or even 15 miles a day. So our biochemistry, our milieu intérieur, the mix of hormones and enzymes and lipids and all that stuff in our bloodstream, relies on the fact that we get a lot of exercise. This isn't true for our closest neighbors, the bonobos and the chimps and the orangutans and the gorillas. They're all fine sitting around all day at the zoo. They keep a low body mass, their blood chemistry is good because they're gatherers. They're just accustomed to sitting around all day cracking nuts, and their system expects that. Humans uniquely are hunter-gatherers, and their machinery is expecting miles of walking a day. And when it doesn't happen that way, when we slump in front of our computer all day and just walk from the house to the car to the office to the car, and the car to your PC at home, we're really abusing our biochemistry. And so our bad cholesterol goes up, our good cholesterol goes down, our insulin goes up, and our all-cause mortality goes up. Epidemiologists calculate with some precision that we lose on average 2 life years from just sitting in front of our computers. And going to the gym doesn't fix it. That's on like a completely different account. It's just the act of sitting static all day long is terrible for people. So, I thought, well, how hard can this be to fix? And here's where my training in epidemiology was kind of leapt in. I trained with Dr. Susan Baker at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins here in the United States. And Sue taught all of her students, you can't harangue or shame or blame people into better behavior. You have to redesign their environment so that they can't behave badly. Because otherwise you're just going to be yelling into the void for your whole life. So airbags are a great example. You put an airbag in every car, and now you don't have to yell at people. Their face is going to land in an airbag if they drive drunk or have bad luck or whatever. So, and less obviously things like divided highways. If you just put a divider, a metal or some kind of barrier down the middle of your highway, people can't hit each other head on at 70 miles an hour anymore. They can only hit people from behind, and those accidents are way less fatal. I know this stuff. I did it for a living for a long time. So by redesigning the environment, you can make it safe for people. So the idea for us was, okay, how do we redesign a chair so that it's safe for people to sit on, so that it's perhaps even healthful? And it turns out that, the problem is sitting still, so you need a chair that encourages people to move. It's just, it seems obvious in retrospect, but it took quite a while to tumble to it. And then our project just became a design project. How do you make a chair that keeps people in motion the whole time they're sitting? And it turns out that we're not the first people to actually have this idea. If you dive in, you can find active chairs on the web. But our take was a little different. As an epidemiologist, I want to make these things so inexpensive that everybody could have one. Because as an epidemiologist, if you're selling a chair for $1,000 or more, you're not solving the problem for most people, because most people don't have $1,000 to spend on a chair, for crying out loud. So it became a design problem, and again, it's just hubris. I got no business designing anything. I wasted the last 25 years in the operating room. I didn't get out much. But I was lucky to fall into a group of very talented designers here in a makerspace in Burlington, Vermont, who could see that I had a good idea, and they could also tell that I was hopeless. And so they took me and said, well, doctor, let us help you. And really within a year, we had pretty good prototypes that we were firing out over the web, selling over the web to people to get feedback to see how this was working out. And now a few years on, we've sold over 5,000 chairs, and we tell people, if you don't like it, send it back. We'll pay the postage both ways. 4% of our chairs come back. People love them. And the idea is drop dead simple. You just make a chair that wobbles when you sit on it. And you'd think, oh, well, you just need a hemisphere to get it to wobble smoothly and not have a bump in the middle. And it wasn't so easy. But, after more prototypes than I care to think about, we hit upon this shape. It's the volume of intersection of 2 cylinders at right angles with non-coincident axes and possibly different radii. I mentioned one of my interests is math. But anyway, so if you take this shape and put it on a surface, it rocks. And if you take another surface and put it on it, it rocks. And because they're 90 degrees opposed, you get rocking in all directions. So if you just slip this thing under the seat pan of a chair, now you're able to rock in all directions. And it's very subtle motion. I mean, you have to constantly be rebalancing, because there's really no effort involved until you get toward the extremes of rocking, and then there's some gradual onset by Hooke's law of kind of keeping it from tipping too far. But the idea is that in order to stay sitting, you have to stay in a balanced posture. So this does a couple things. First of all, your spinal reflexes know what to do with gravity. They were programmed as you were a baby, going from creeping to crawling to toddling to walking. So if you just free your spinal reflexes in gravity, your spine will automatically orient itself in an optimal posture. I've done this experiment maybe hundreds of times by taking our chairs out on the walking street in Burlington, Vermont, and just putting some chairs out on a sunny day and watching, And it's always the same. People come by and they give the seat a wiggle, and then they sit down on it for a moment. They lose their balance, and then they find their balance. And then within a minute or a minute and a half or 2 minutes, their sternum comes up, their head comes back, it balances on the atlas and axis, the first two cervical vertebrae, their shoulders come down, and really they're sitting with basically perfect posture within a couple of minutes, just by responding to gravity and having to organize their posture really millisecond to millisecond, because the chair requires that they keep rebalancing. So they get to try many different postures in a very short period of time, and they don't move to the next postural choice unless it feels better. And so they very quickly find their way to basically perfect posture. And these experiments were really an eye-opener for me, because one day we had like a bunch of chairs out, and some like 13 or 14-year-old girl just sat down at the periphery on one of our chairs. And she was just sitting in the sun, kind of blissing out, kind of rocking and playing with our chair, forward and back and round and making circles and so on. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, And then she just got up and walked away. But she didn't get about 10 paces when she turned around and she said, I think it makes me walk better. Because she had recalibrated and readjusted the way she was using her spine, so that it was, she was kind of optimally using her spine. And this doesn't just apply to walking. It doesn't just apply to sitting. It applies to walking and everything you do. So with kind of wordlessly, without an owner's manual or a trainer or a video, this chair kind of lets people find their best posture. And so, it's very interesting to see, what it does to people. But the real question for me as a physician was, but does it do anybody any good? And here's where, selling chairs over the web is extremely helpful, because when people buy a chair, we have their email, and I send them an email and say, how's it going, blah, blah, blah. And I got these heartfelt emails that went on for pages about how it transformed their lives. And, they were going to have to quit their job. Their back pain was so bad, and now it's fine. And as a researcher, and especially I've published over 300 peer-reviewed papers and book chapters over my life. I review for a bunch of journals. I have a master's in biostatistics. So I know about research. And it makes me extremely uncomfortable when you start getting anecdotal reports that you want to believe, because, as Feynman got a Nobel Prize for quantum mechanics back in the 70s or 80s. Anyway, he famously observed, first, you must not fool yourself. And unfortunately, you are the easiest person to fool. So I've been hyper alert that, I don't want to drink my own Kool-Aid, but we've gotten so many emails from people that I'm actually starting to believe that, this could be a very general solution for people with back pain.
And are there other studies out there for you mentioned there are other manufacturers, there are other active chairs. Is there any good quality research at this point supporting the use of active chairs, Dr. Osler, that you're aware of? Is that something you're looking at, or?
No, there's no good research. People have done stuff like put accelerometers on people with active chairs to see how much they move. They put rebreathing masks on people to measure how much carbon dioxide they're producing, to see, to document that their resting metabolism goes up by 20 or 30% when they're sitting on an active chair, because they're using their core muscles rather than just going dark. So we know that people use these chairs. We know that they have a metabolic impact. The business of studying back pain turns out to be a fraught thing, because you need lots of subjects, questionnaires, and blinding people to whether their chair is active or not is impossible. So what you need is a crossover design, and before you know it, you need a grad student, and you need several $100,000 worth of funding, and you need several years. And I've put in a couple of proposals to the NIH, hoping that they would fund such a study. But this is just so outside the realm of what's understood, that it's been hard to find funding. And I've got a couple other gigs. I'm a emeritus professor at the University of Vermont, where I lead a research group doing COVID research, and I've got this startup company where we're making these active chairs to get out in the world, just to basically. Well, it's interesting. It's a research design where you just you don't have a control group, but you do have the before and after stuff, and we do have feedback from people who say it's transformative. So and finally, I shouldn't be doing the research. Somebody else should be doing this research, because I obviously have a dog in this fight. I designed this thing, for crying out loud. So, I've been corresponding with colleagues around, and in COVID times, very hard to get a new study started where you need subjects and in-person kind of stuff. So long story short, there really isn't any good research about active sitting for back pain. But metabolically, we have some pretty clear insights into it. And anthropologically, we know, as I've said before, in cultures where people don't have our crummy ergonomic back chairs, people pretty much don't have back pain. So, there's very strong circumstantial evidence that getting people to sit actively can be an immense help.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we see a lot of patients that we'll always ask about, well, what's the best posture? I don't know why I've got back pain. I'm sat with a good ergonomic chair. I've got my laptop set up. My workstation is pretty good. I've been seen by occupational health. Why am I suffering from back pain? And
apparently those are not the problem.
Yeah, sure.
And if ergonomic chairs with lumbar support are the solution, and have been the solution for the last 50 years.
Yeah, why the problem?
How come 80% of people still have back pain?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's and so I'm a researcher. That's what I do. And so I went to academic ergonomic conferences to hear what these people were telling each other, and frankly, I was appalled. The state of research for ergonomics, these people are showing pie charts to each other. I mean, they don't have any experimental design, they don't have experimental models. It's breathtaking how benighted what passes for ergonomic research is. Mostly it's people certifying each other to be experts, but there's no real data there. And I was amazed, because in the world of medicine, we're pretty careful not to put out a new drug or vaccine until we've seen what it does. But in the world of ergonomics, standing desks, great. It's not sitting, must be good, right? Well, how does that happen? Or there are no studies of standing. Well, that's not quite true. There's a great study, Smith et al., American Journal of Epidemiology, 2018, followed 7,500 patients in Canada for 10 years. Big, expensive epidemiologic study. Half of the people sitting and half the people standing. And those standing had twice the rate of heart attacks. I'll repeat that. Those at the standing desks had twice the rate of heart attacks. It was a shocker, right? Because we've for long believed that sitting caused heart attacks. Okay, we've known that since studies in the UK on bus drivers who were the driver sitting and the driver and the ticket taker running up and down the stairs. Vastly different rates of heart. We know that's from the early 1950s. So it was sort of a surprise to see people standing were having more heart attacks. It's not exactly understood why, except that when people are at a standing desk, they're not doing Tai Chi, right? They're lock a hip, lean on the desk, and they don't move. And so there's a column of blood going from the right atrium down to their ankles. It's just pretty much sitting there, because without, muscular contraction to pump blood through the deep veins of the leg, the blood pretty much just pools and just dilates the veins, minute by minute, hour by hour. And finally, you may know that the deep veins in the legs have very diaphanous valves that come across them that help the muscles pump blood back to the heart. Really, half the pumping action is done by external muscles. But as the veins dilate, finally they get so big in diameter that the leaflets are no longer competent. So there's the column of blood just dilating the veins in the leg. And as a result, people used to get varicose veins from their standing occupations. And as a general surgeon, I stripped out miles of varicose veins in the OR. It's an ugly operation, I got to say, but it's better than the pain and inflammation of varicose veins. So there's that whole history of standing wasn't so great on industrial assembly lines when people developed varicose veins. So the idea that we'll just have standing desks and be fine. This is not true. There are a host of problems that come with standing desks. So, and this is a long digression just to say that leaping on standing desks because standing is the opposite of sitting. So if sitting's bad, standing desk must be good. That's not research. That's just dumb. The opposite of sitting is moving, and what posture you're in when you're moving. I'm not sure that matters so much, but if you can sit and be moving, that's the opposite of sitting and not moving, because it's moving that's what's at the core of what's going on here. So anyway, just to say, a lot of money is being spent on standing desks, and based on no research. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, well, we speak to a lot of patients about this subject, about the workstations, and we talk a lot about genetically very little changes in many years. Lifestyle changed significantly. The best posture is a variable posture. If you're going to be static, we're designed to move, and so walking we find for patients is very therapeutic because it causes co-contraction of muscles, and presumably that's exactly what you're finding with the active chair, that it's causing the activation of the muscles that are ultimately supporting and stabilizing the spine, because they're fundamentally important in doing that and preventing back pain and back issues.
Right. And really, I think walking is the key. I love that you mentioned walking. Hippocrates, famously said, walking is man's best medicine. And it turns out walking is a very interesting thing, because it pretty much defines the human species. It's the thing that it's something we uniquely do, right? We're the bipedal organism. And what's so great about it is it's not what it seems to be. You can find video on YouTube of a guy walking quite comfortably who has no legs. He's born congenitally with no femurs, but it doesn't matter, because he walks quite happily on his ischial tuberosities. His steps are quite short. He takes steps of a couple of 3 inches, but he's just walking along quite comfortably. One ischial tuberosity, the next is striding along, and you can see his posture is good, he's quite comfortable walking. It turns out that your legs, which people strongly associate with walking, are just amplifiers that let you take longer steps. The real business of walking happens with the spine and the hips. And so our chairs allow people to walk with their spine and their hips, and their feet don't have to move. So in effect, they're walking, but they don't have to decide where to go. This idea has kind of been kind of crudely adapted with the idea of treadmill desks, where you can trudge along at your desk, literally walking at your desk. The problem is that your office mates will murder you for the noise and confusion you're creating, and mousing becomes very inaccurate at about 1.5 miles an hour worth of traveling. Typing is very difficult, and treadmill desks haven't caught on for a variety of reasons. They're expensive, they're noisy, and they actually decrease productivity. If what you want is walking, well, all you need is an unstable seat pan in the chair, and you get all of the spine and hip stuff that goes with walking, without any of the noise and confusion that comes along with a treadmill desk. And a lot cheaper.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so are you finding then that active chairs are we talking about active chairs as a preventative method for back pain, or are we talking about them as a solution to sufferers? Because if you've got that kind of disc herniation, or if you've got that underlying damage there as a result of poor posture, poor habits, maybe trauma, or although we generally see that back pain is a result of cumulative trauma as opposed to a significant accident. Have you found results that demonstrate that back pain and significant maybe sciatic disc discomfort resolves as a result of these active chairs, or are we more focused on these as a preventative measure, do you think?
Yeah, so I think that as a preventative measure, they're a terrific idea, full stop. And so, we've set out to get active chairs into schools, and we created a design that we give away so schools can make their own chairs for $5 or $10 a pop out of plywood and a lacrosse ball. We really believe that making active sitting the normal way to sit is the solution to back pain writ large across the entire Western world. That said, it's very hard to talk adults into sitting on some new kind of chair that moves. I got as far as pitching to a vice president of Steelcase, one of the biggest office furniture makers in the United States. And she said, well, maybe for kids, but grown-ups won't sit on such a thing. And
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought, well, okay, fine. So we'll have to talk to kids because they're not so hidebound. But so that's one way to think about it. But it's also the case that we fired out a lot of chairs. We've had, this, but people in back pain can be really, really uncomfortable. And I have had people sobbing into the phone, begging me to, get a chair to FedEx by midnight, really desperate. And we have too numerous to count people saying, this solved my acute back pain problem. This saved my career. I can go back to being the head of IT at Burton Snowboards, whereas I was going to have to quit, kind of thing. So although I think of it as a prophylactic measure because if people's posture is good and their core strength is good and they're basically walking the whole time they're at their desk, I think back pain probably won't even arise as an issue. For those who already have back pain, it's a different kettle of fish because it kind of depends on why you have back pain. If you have a gunshot wound to the spine, no chair is going to help you. You need a talented surgeon, or as we say in the business, bright lights and cold steel. But it turns out that most back pain, if you get a CT scan or an MRI or get plain films, you'll find abnormalities.
Absolutely.
There's this bit of, you'll find abnormalities. But curiously, if you look at the films, abnormal, not abnormal, and decide who's abnormal, and then go ask them if they have back pain, there's almost no relationship.
Yeah, pain doesn't equal damage.
Yeah, so just what you see on your studies doesn't really correlate very well with pain. So pain is like something else. And exactly what it is for most people, if you have metastatic cancer, I don't know, there are a lot of reasons to have back pain, but those kind of very discrete, well-defined problems, metastatic prostate cancer, breast cancer, those kinds of things are actually pretty small ball. 80% of people have no findings, as you know, and there's really no good reason for them to be having pain, except that very likely they're using their spines in ways that their spines were not designed for. So if you can give them a way to have their spine active and their posture good all day long, very likely it will help a lot of people. Will it cure every single person? No therapy has ever done that. Mm-hmm. Well, smallpox vaccine, we eradicated smallpox. There have been some spectacularly successful therapies in the history of medicine, but something like back pain is, but I in my heart of hearts, I think that, sitting actively is likely to be a big help to most people. And the risk is quite small. It's not like signing up for back surgery where if it goes badly, you're in for a lifetime of catastrophe.
Right, yeah. It kind of makes sense as at least a measure to try, even if you're suffering, rather than just go down that one way street of surgery. Exactly. Is there an argument, do you think, for people as a preventative measure? It clearly makes sense. Do you think there's an argument that for people that are suffering, that maybe are deconditioned, don't have the core control that they should have? Because let's face it, a lot of people are lazy, not proactive with their health, and should be doing more, should move better. Do you think there's an argument that this could be a lazy way for some people, and actually where we should be encouraging movement as well? What's your feeling on that? Do you still advise, support, recommend that people should focus on exercises as well to support the healthy movement and functioning of the muscles and the spine?
Oh yeah, no, I think people should be doing Tai Chi and going for walks with their dog, and all that stuff I think is terrific. But in order to do Tai Chi or go for a walk with your dog or go for a run or whatever, you have to make the decision to go for a walk with your dog. And if it's raining or it's snowing or you're busy, it just might not happen. There's the human engineering factor. But active sitting, if you just take your chair and put it in the garage and put an active chair under your desk, well, you don't have to decide. You just sit down and you're automatically moving. You may notice that I'm like tipping all over the place. Because of course, I've been sitting on one or another prototypes of our chairs, since, I don't know, for the last 5 years. And we have them at the dining table, we have them at our desks. My poor family has suffered through this. But it was interesting. The first time I put my wife on one of our active chairs, she was happy enough, and then the next day she said, "Boy, I'm kind of sore." Well, she does yoga and she's fit, but the business of using her core actively for an hour was really sort of a surprise for her, just how deconditioned she had become. And so now we're careful to tell people, if you get one of our chairs, try it for 15 or 20 minutes the first day and just see how you feel the next day. And people kind of build up to sitting on our chairs all day long. We have one guy who's 86, and it took him a couple of months to kind of work up to sitting on our chair all day long, because it doesn't have any arm rest or foot rest or back rest or head rest or any lumbar or any of that junk. You're just using your own internal ergonomic structure, your perfectly designed spine to kind of support all of the rest of you. But after a few months, he was sitting all day on a chair quite happily, and then he called me quite excited. He said, "I've got a six-pack for the first time in my life." He's in his 80s. Well, how great is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's been the uptake then since how long is it now since you launched the chairs, since they've been available? And are you finding, I know we discussed briefly via email, the uptake from corporations and whether it's more individuals that are suffering? What's been the feedback from the market?
No, it's interesting. So when we ship chairs to individuals, which is mostly what we do, the feedback has been, if you don't like it, send it back. 4% come back. So 96% of people love these things. So that's individuals. We've been to office wellness conferences, and talk to the really big players, Boeing and Cisco and those kinds of people. And interestingly, the executives, the HR people who come to these kind of conferences say, "Oh, that's great. No, that's terrific. Send us a couple." So we would, we send off a bunch of chairs to these big companies, and boom, it runs into the wall of their on-staff ergonomicists who say, "If it doesn't have a back, no one can sit on it all day. It's too much." And I say, "Wait. That can't be." They said, "No one could do." I do that. I'm a 70-year-old coot, and what do you mean no one can? It falls on deaf ears because the ergonomists all read the same book and all sing the same song. They just can't even think of it. So small companies like Burton Snowboards and places like that, where they have a relationship with their people, the uptake is quite good. But as soon as you have a company big enough to have an ergonomist, you run into a stone wall. Interestingly, though, our this whole viral pandemic thing, a lot of people are working from home, and so the company Google in the United States said, "Okay, a lot of people are working from home, sitting in bed with their laptop. That's not so great. Tell you what, we're gonna give everybody $2,000 to upgrade their home office." And then somehow our chair got to the top of the list of preferred chairs for home offices. And we sold hundreds of chairs to the 54 Google sites across the United States cities that have Google sites. It's a little hard to be sure it was a Google employee, but you kind of got the message when suddenly there's a spike in sales from the city that happens to have a Google facility. So, so Google, was kind of soaked up hundreds of our chairs because they don't have a ergonomic gatekeeper. They let their workers at home make decisions about what they want to sit on. And as soon as the decision gets devolved to the sitter, we win in a walk, so to say.
Interesting. And so what's the future for you with the active chairs? What's the mission? What's
it's
the goal?
Interesting. A couple of 3 or 4 years ago, somehow we were in New York City talking to a guy who's really big in the world of office furniture. He's a company with thousands of employees, just like distributing chairs to big companies. And we got an hour of his time because his wife was in love with our chair. She's a dancer and a body worker kind of person. And she insisted that he meet with us, and he was lukewarm, but nice. And so my kid, who's my partner in this, smart kid, turned to him and said, "Do we have a chance?" And this guy said, 10 years ago, I said, no way. This is just too weird. But now, people are standing up and they're walking on treadmills and they're sitting on yoga balls. Who knows what people are going to do? So the answer is, I don't know. You might have a chance, which we thought was extremely encouraging coming from a guy who really was from a previous century. And then, I don't know if you follow American football. I don't. But they had the Super Bowl, which is like the big game of the year.
Yeah.
And there was an ad on the Super Bowl this time around for active chairs.
Wow.
1 minute of
okay.
A company fully had taken out a full 1 minute ad that showcased half a dozen of their different active chairs. I know their CEO. We're friendly competitors. We've been swapping email for 5 or 6 years. Our chairs are better, but they were recently acquired by Knoll, one of the biggest chair companies in the world, and they were happy to spend $5 million to try and get the word out about active sitting with a very flashy, very cool ad. So I think that active sitting is poised to actually take over. I think it's going to. I think that 10 or 15 years from now, people are going to sit down on a normal chair and think, "Boy, what's wrong with this? It doesn't move." That's my goal anyway.
Yeah.
The problem is that I'm 70 years old and I got to pick up the pace, or I'm not going to be here to see it.
Well, it sounds like you're getting some decent traction over there, and it's obviously been some years since you've had the chair out there. And you say that now 5,000 is the mark you've hit in terms of sales.
5,200 and something as of yesterday. So we just consider, and we were firing all of them out of our basement. We'd like assemble them in the basement and put them in a box and drive them to the post office. But now we have a company here in Vermont. Everything happens here in Vermont. A company in northeast Vermont, Manufacturing Solutions Incorporated, where they assemble, box, and ship our chairs for us. So, and this company also assembles boxes and ships every Concept 2 rowing machine in the world. So they can, and a rowing machine is a little more complicated than our chair, a lot more complicated. So they can fire out millions of chairs. So we're in a position that we could supply the demand if we can find a way to get the word out, which is why I'm here with you, because we don't actually have an advertising budget, because our deal is we want to make these things so inexpensive anybody can have one. And if we start pouring money into Super Bowl ads, the people, it adds up. So so far we've relied on earned media, chatting with people like you, and we had an article drop in the Wall Street Journal. We had an article about us in the Boston Globe. We've had pieces done about on local television and public television, stuff like that. So we're gradually finding traction, but we're not there yet. We don't. But other people are helping us, like our friends at Fully, who had this Super Bowl ad, which kind of gets the word out, at least that there are different ways to sit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so of the 5,000 chairs sold so far, how many of those of a percentage are over in the US? You say that you're shipping outside the
No,
US as well, or
we've got
capable
chairs that
of?
have gone to Austria and Australia and New Zealand and Taiwan and England, of course. France, Germany. I mean, we've sent these things to 25 different countries anyway, which it turns out to be pretty. In the old days, this kind of stuff would be hard, but now there's software, so we use something called ShipStation, just like calculates the postage and then. UPS or
Yeah.
FedEx, just makes it happen. So all those frictions that used to kind of slow down the rate at which a new technology could be adopted have really been minimized, and we've taken ruthless advantage. Well, I didn't realize you could do this. I was like typing stuff into Word and cutting out labels and driving it to the post office. My kid figured out that no. There's much better software.
Okay, and so this for me was quite when you reached out and got in touch. Given my background, given my interest, given the expertise that I would like to think I hadn't really been introduced to active chairs. I hadn't really seen them. Clearly, seen a lot of information on ergonomic chairs and supports, etc., etc. And like I say to so many patients, you can have the best chair in the world, you can have the best workstation in the world, and the best setup and
I don't
input
think
from
you mean
occupational
best. I
health.
think
But
you
if
mean
you're
most expensive.
well, whatever that may be, the answer to them is, or the kind of message to these people is, look, if you're sat in one posture all day in that static position, then your best posture is a variable one, and you've got to get up and move. And if you believe that you can just sit there with this workstation, with this setup, and expect not to get pain, then you're probably a little bit delusional, because the reality is we're not designed for it. So to be introduced to you and the chairs, I'm certainly intrigued. I haven't experienced one myself, but certainly something that I'm going to keep an eye on and look out for sure. And on that basis, for the people listening, where is the best place that they can find out about your particular chairs,
Yeah, so we
and
have
where
a
can they get hold of them?
website, which is Q as in Queen, QOR 360, like core 360, core 360 degrees, QOR360.com. And that's our website where we have our chairs for sale. But I write a blog, and we have videos, and we have reviews, and all the kind of stuff you'd expect to find on a website. But we also have another website, which is buttonchairs.org, buttonchairs.org, where we give away a design for a chair for kids that's cut with a CNC router out of plywood, and you can just stamp out as many chairs as you want using our CNC router file that we let people download. This has been downloaded about 2,000 times so far around the world, and it's our effort to try and get kids sitting actively as well. And it's been a lot of fun watching kids, because kids instinctively know they need to move. When some grown-up tells them to sit still, they know that's a bad idea, right? I mean, kids come into the world so graceful, able to squat, and then by the time they get even a few years into grade school, they've lost the ability to squat. They've lost the brilliant postures that were available to them, which have been systematically stolen from them by forcing them to sit still in crappy chairs all day long in school. And they know better. They want to squirm. And our chairs allow kids to squirm. It's kind of sanctioned squirming. And they also allow grown-ups to squirm,
Yeah. So there you go, for those people listening. There's your license to squirm and move in your chair, or certainly if you're telling your children off, or they're getting told off by their teachers, then they know better than you think. So Dr. Osler, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really insightful, and we'll certainly share those links so that people can take a look and find out more about the work that you do and the chairs that are on offer, and see if that can be a solution to their back problems. Really appreciate the input.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.